وعباد الرحمن الذين يمشون على الأرض هونا وإذا خاطبهم الجاهلون قالوا سلاما. والذين يبيتون لربهم سجدا وقياما والذين يقولون ربنا اصرف عنا عذاب جهنم إن عذابها كان غراما إنها ساءت مستقرا ومقاما والذين إذا أنفقوا لم يسرفوا ولم يقتروا وكان بين ذلك قواما والذين لا يدعون مع الله إلها آخر والذين لا يدعون مع الله إلها آخر ولا يقتلون النفس التي حرم الله إلا بالحق ولا يقتلون النفس التي حرم الله إلا بالحق ولا يزنون ومن يفعل ذلك يلقى أثاما يضاعف له العذاب يوم القيامة ويخلد فيه مهانا إلا من تاب وآمن وعمل عملا صالحا إلا من تاب وآمن وعمل عملا صالحا فأولئك يبدل الله سيئاتهم حسنات وكان الله غفورا رحيما ومن تاب وعمل صالحا فإنه يتوب إلى الله متابا والذين لا يشهدون الزور وإذا مروا باللغو مروا كراما والذين إذا ذكروا بآيات ربهم لم يخروا عليها صما وعميانا والذين يقولون ربنا هب لنا من أزواجنا وذرياتنا قرة أعين واجعلنا للمتقين إماما أولئك يجزون الغرفة بما صبروا ويلقون فيها تحية وسلاما خالدين فيها حسنت مستقرا ومقاما حسنت مستقرا ومقاما قل ما يعبأ بكم ربي لولا دعاؤكم فقد كذبتم فسوف يكون لزاما صدق الله العظيم. الفاتحة.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you all for coming to our Muharram lecture series on 23 years of prophethood and transformation. This year's lecture series is sponsored on behalf of the marhumin displayed on the TV outside of the chapel. Please can we recite a Surah Fatiha for these and all other marhumin. Al-Fatiha. Exclusive to tonight, there will be a 15-minute break after namaz, followed by Dua Kumel beginning at 9:50 p.m. Also, just on the note of health and safety, in the events of any emergency, fire exits are located at the back of the chapel, outside in the main area, and towards the dining area as well. The conference room is available for families with children, so if you are with your young ones, then we are humbly requesting you to use that conference room. Without further ado, I'd like to invite Shaykh Arif to deliver tonight's lecture, but we are getting more and more packed every night, so please can I request you all to move forward with a loud salawat, salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
رحم الله من قرأ الفاتحة. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين شفيع ذنوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا وحبيب قلوبنا أبي القاسم محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين وأصحابه المنتجبين ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى قيام يوم الدين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. أما بعد، السلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. أعظم الله أجورنا وأجوركم بمسابنا بأبي عبد الله الحسين عليه الصلاة والسلام. So we've been stating that this whole phenomena of the prophetic message has to be seen as the Quran, the Prophet, and the context of the time operating together and coming together. Almost as if it's all pre-planned. Things seem to be happening at the right time and bringing about the right effects. Now, at times, of course, as we will read on in the next few days, there are certain decisions that are being made that might appear wrong, and indeed they might have been not the most optimal decisions. But then we find that in a curious way they are tweaked, and the end result is as could be expected from a decision that was an optimal decision. So things are falling into place in a way that requires us to think through this very carefully. We spoke of the Mi'raj, and I want to pick up from the event of Mi'raj. Now, Mi'raj could have been a great point of disaster for the Prophet, because they would have said he is just dreaming things, saying things out, he's overly imaginative. And in fact, it was very perturbing and disturbing for his companions, those who followed him, and even we realize that maybe Hazrat Abu Talib himself might have been taken aback as to why do you say these things. But in fact, it worked in a way that confirmed his status in the minds of his followers and put his antagonists on the back foot, because when he said there's a caravan on its way and it's coming in this direction, and he described it and then they attested to it, immediately they said, yes, this is a man of a superior caliber, he is being revealed to as far as his followers are concerned, as far as the skeptics were concerned, well, they were encouraged to believe that no, he is a truthful person from God. Now, on that note, Mi'raj is the closest that we get to what we can term as a miracle in the lifetime of the Prophet. But it is not quite a miracle, yet it had the effects of a miracle. A miracle is something that a prophet brings about prior to its time, according to my definition, prior to its time. In a future world, human beings may be able to achieve such physical sort of manipulation of nature. But it was premature. Before its time, it is done. And no human intellect can actually attain that sort of a feat of whatever the prophets were doing, like resurrecting the dead or other miracles. I forget, what were the other miracles? Falling inside the fire and splitting the sea is not a miracle, actually. It's a natural event that we explained last year. But it's not really a miracle, to be precise, because a miracle is something that a prophet is told to bring about in order for it to be a testimony to the righteousness of his claim. Now, the prophet hasn't been asked to bring about a miracle. Yet it happens, and it has the same effect because it bears witness to the prophethood of the blessed prophet. Now, on that note, when we talk about the splitting of the moon, it is not a miracle because it hasn't happened. Now, I know what the Muslim scholars will say. They will say, well, there were 50 people who bear witness that they saw the splitting of the moon. Now, here you have to ask that the methods of validating reports within jurisprudence are methods that work in a localized setting in an event. So, for example, if we were to say that the Prophet said this and 50 people heard it, or for example, the people were to say that we were at Ghadir Khum and the Prophet raised the hand of Imam Ali and he said, he is the master after I have gone, we will say how many people are reporting this, and the response would come, 150 people from different regions of the world are reporting this event. And the jurisprudential mind will then evaluate and say, well, could they have conceived of a lie and propagated it? The answer is no. There were people of different regions. Some of them hated Imam Ali, some of them loved Imam Ali, and some were indifferent to Imam Ali. So we will say yes. So if 150 people are narrating this, they have witnessed an event, it's a local event, and then they're narrating it and 150 others are narrating it and 150 others are narrating it, then it's a continuous report and we have no cause to doubt its veracity. However, splitting of the moon, think about it. How many people narrate it? 50. If I were to say, even if you were to add another 0 to it, 500, or another 0 to it, 5,000, or another 0 to it, 50,000, or another 500,000 people, I will say from where? And you will all say they were all in Makkah. The question here is that this is a global event. The moon is not confined to Makkah. The moon is there in the sky. Everybody can see it. How many people from Medina have narrated that they saw the moon split? How many people in Syria have recorded it? The people sharing the same night in other regions of the world. How many of these people have seen the moon being split in two? The answer is, well, we don't find these reports in our records, in our history. When we do find such extraordinary events, they are recorded by the human community. For example, the floods of Nabi Nuh, they are recorded in every culture, within the Abrahamic faiths, in other faiths. It's a global event, everybody witnessed it. But the moon being split in two, even if 5,000 people were to have seen this event occurring in Makkah, it means next to nothing. Because the rest of the world should have seen it as well. So the fact is, we can't confirm that moon splitting has happened, and it's not a miracle. But something that comes very, very close to the split, to a miracle is definitely the event of Mi'raj. It's recorded in the Quran in a couple of places, and it has had the desired effect. The splitting of the moon has not had any desired effect. The Mi'raj has. In any case, so the Mi'raj happens. Abu Talib dies. The Prophet is vulnerable. Abu Lahab is the head of the clan of the Hashimis. He is not going to offer the Prophet any protection. Prophet is being attacked. He is being abused. The Prophet is looking for protectors. He goes to Taif to find protection of other tribes, because do bear in mind, at that point, if you belong to a tribe, then you enjoyed the protection of that tribe. Abu Lahab did not care much for the protection of the Prophet, and he's the uncle of the Prophet at the same time. Until a distant relative of the Prophet, who was also one of the heads of the tribes of Mecca, offered him protection, but that was a very loose protection. And the people now were conspiring to put the Prophet to death. Now the reason why the situation was brought to this level was not only because the Prophet was preaching his own message, because do bear in mind, in the earlier phase of the Meccan preaching, the Prophet did say to the kuffar, lakum dinukum waliyadin. You have your religion, I have my religion. I do not want to antagonize you. We can live together with separate ideologies. La a'budu ma ta'budun, wa la antum a'abiduna ma a'bud. I don't worship what you worship, you don't worship what I worship. This was the initial phase. Later on, as we saw, the Quran became very forceful in challenging the Meccan ideology. To say, أَرَأَيْتُمُ اللَّاتَ وَالْعُزَّى وَالْمَنَاتِ ثَالِثَةً أُخْرَى. Have you seen Lat and Uzza and the third one Manat? I mean, although the Quran was posing a rational challenge there, that do you have sons and God has daughters, this is indeed an unjust distribution, that you do not want daughters for yourselves, but you attribute God with daughters, do you not think? But the language, you can see, can be construed as being very offensive. How can anybody talk of our gods in this way? Then you come towards the later part of the Prophet's stay in Mecca, and you look at Surah An'am, it's extremely unrelenting, extremely forceful. Now, look at the tone of Surah An'am. There are more qul, the emphatic say in An'am than there are in any other surah. It's very confrontational in that way. It's very, very challenging. So now the Prophet, on the one hand, doesn't know why. I'm saying he doesn't know because you can't understand the logic in this. Why is the Quran so forceful, so adamant? That's the first thing. On the other hand, the protection has gone. He knows he is in danger, yet the Quran is unrelenting. What happens is that the broader context is being constructed for his reception. He is to flee Mecca and go to Medina, and the grounds are being prepared for that. Both in Mecca, his safety is compromised due to the constant preaching that the Quran is giving him and challenges that the Quran is asking him to put forward. And two, his vulnerability. Three, the preaching is being heard by another group of people who are suffering and who are not so steeped in the pagan system as the Meccans are. These are the people of Medina. Now, if you look at some of the historians, they say that when the Medinan community came to the annual pilgrimage, at one point towards the end of his stay in Mecca, these were the verses that were being revealed of Surah Al-An'am. And I shall recite them. قُلْ تَعَالُوا أَتْلُوا عَلَيْكُمْ أَتْلُوا مَا حَرَّمَ رَبُّكُمْ عَلَيْكُمْ. Say, come to me. Let me read to you what God has prohibited. أَلَّا تُشْرِكُوا بِهِ شَيْئًا. Do not associate anything with him. Now, obviously, this is now confronting the Meccans. But look at the rest of it. وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا. And be good to your parents. وَلَا تَقْتُلُوا أَوْلَادَكُمْ مِنْ إِمْلَاقٍ. Do not kill your children through fear of hunger and poverty. نَحْنُ نَرْزُقُكُمْ وَإِيَّاهُمْ. We will feed you and them. We will sustain them and you. وَلَا تَقْرَبُوا الْفَوَاحِشَ مَا ظَهَرَ مِنْهَا وَمَا بَطَنَ. Do not approach indecency, whatever of it is apparent and whatever of it is concealed. وَلَا تَقْتَلُوا النَّفْسَ الَّتِي حَرَّمَ اللَّهُ إِلَّا بِالْحَقِّ. Do not kill a soul that God has made sacred, save through justice. ذَلِكُمْ وَسَّاكُمْ بِهِ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَعْقِلُونَ. These are the admonitions that God gives to you so that you may become mindful. وَلَا تَقْرَبُوا مَالَ الْيَتِيمِ إِلَّا بِالَّتِي هِيَ أَحْسَنُ. And do not approach the wealth of an orphan save with good intention. حَتَّى يَبْلُغَ أَشُدَّ, until they arrive at an age where they can look after their own financial affairs. وَأَوْفُوا الْكَيْلَ وَالْمِيزَانَ بِالْقِسْطِ, and give in proper measures when you weigh things and you transact. وَلَا تُكَلَّفُ نَفْسٌ إِلَّا وُسْعَهَا. Allah does not burden a soul beyond what it can bear. وَإِذَا قُلْتُمْ فَعَدِلُوا, and when you adjudicate, then be just in your adjudication. Now when the Madinian community heard this, they said, well, these are the very problems that we are suffering with. This man is calling towards peace on the one hand, unity, brotherhood. He is calling towards moral actions, ending of societal injustices and oppressions. This is the man we need in Medina. Now the context of Medina is such that the Aus and Khazraj, the two tribes with the Jewish clans, were always fighting. They both came from Yemen many centuries ago, and these tribes developed into clans and they were constantly fighting and there was no respite. Now they're seeing a man here of a prestigious character caliber. His message is sound. He's talking of peace. He's talking of coexistence. He's talking about moral goodness. So they said, this is the right man. This was having an impact on the Medinan people. Now what happens in these years, in the later years, is that the people from Medina, what we call coincidentally, met up with Imam Ali and Abu Bakr. And they said to the people of Medina, there is this prophet who has come, who is preaching a message of justice and peace and tolerance. So they were intrigued. They come to the prophet in 621, a year before his hijrah. And they pledge allegiance to the prophet, together with a few others. Now this is known as the first allegiance paid to the prophet at Aqaba. The prophet sends with them an emissary to go to Medina and to teach the people of Medina about Islam. It is said that this Sahabi of the prophet, by the name of Mus'ab bin Umair, he went and he preached the Quran. And he impacted and influenced many people of Medina. So the people of Medina were being prepared gradually. The next year, 500 odd people came from Medina, from whom 73 or 75 pledged allegiance to the Prophet, and the others merely came to see what he was saying and what he was all about. And they were greatly impressed. When they went back, the Prophet had decided to go to Medina after they left. Now, the Prophet took a pledge from them that they would not worship anybody but Allah. They would spend their wealth on the poor, but more than anything else, that they will protect the Prophet as they protect their own women and their own children and their own property. This was the pledge that was given by the Medinian community. After this, the Prophet asks his Sahaba to go to migrate to Medina. Now, when they migrated to Medina, this was seen as a great insult by the Meccans. So on the one hand, the Meccans see this as an insult. On the other hand, the Quran phrases this as the people of Mecca forcing the Prophet and the believers out of Mecca. Now, this is very important when we will see later on in these lectures that this is the very thing that they forced you out that was made a justification for the raids that the Prophet mounted against the Qurayshi caravans. Otherwise, the Prophet would not have had a justification. I will explain that when we get there. So it was a very important event in which two parties are seeing it differently. The Meccans are saying, you removed yourselves from us, from your mother community and clan. And that is the biggest insult, which gives them right now to retaliate against the Prophet. The Prophet, on the other hand, sees it as, you evicted us from our houses. And after we left Mecca, you went and plundered all our wealth. So you can see their justification on both sides. What I'm seeing is that when you look at it from a neutral perspective, you will see how wonderfully and phenomenally things are being put in place because this was the excuse that the Muslims needed to justify their later actions, which they now have, looking at it from their perspective. In any case, you know the story of migration, but the amazing thing you find is, it is only in the later part of the Meccan period, and then throughout the Medinian period, then you find the intervention of God, or what we call the intervention of God. Whether it's the intervention of God or of angels, whatever, but we call it the intervention of God. So the first thing is Mi'raj. This is the first time the Prophet is being taken away. Then when the Prophet is in the cave, you find that they are tracking him down. But when they come to the mouth of the cave, they find a spider's web. They find that a pigeon has laid eggs and there is a nest there. When they feel that the Prophet is inside that cave on the mountain, they are detracted by seeing the web unbroken and by seeing that nest. God calls this His intervention. This is mentioned later on in Surah Tawbah, when the people of Medina are exhorted to go out with the Prophet and they were hesitant. These verse came, إِلَّا تَنْصُرُوهُ فَقَدْ نَصَرَهُ اللَّهُ إِذْ أَخْرَجَهُ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا ثَانِي اثْنَيْنِ. If you refuse to assist Muhammad, then Allah has indeed assisted him when the people who disbelieve evicted him from his house or from his town. And two of them fled. إِذْ هُمَا بِالْغَارِ, when both of them were in the cave. إِذْ يَقُولُ لِصَاحِبِهِ, when he said to his companion, لَا تَحْزَنْ إِنَّ اللَّهَ مَعَنَا, do not grieve, Allah is with us. So although this event had happened much earlier, the Quran mentions it much later and looks at it and considers it as an intervention from God. Now you can see here, even in this verse, إِذْ أَخْرَجَهُ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا, when the people who disbelieve evicted him from his residence in Makkah. And this is a very important point to bear in mind, how the Quran is phrasing it. The justification has been given in Surah Baqarah initially, and then later on till Surah Tawbah, the same tone continues. That consistency in that justification. Now, when the Prophet came to Medina, you know where he stayed in Qibla and Masjid Nabi and everything. I don't want to go there, but the Prophet came in Medina at the invitation of the community in Medina, because Aus and Khazraj were fighting amongst themselves. They needed a neutral person to come and bring peace and reconciliation between the two parties. This man does not belong to Aus or to Khazraj. He has a prestigious lineage. His character vouches for himself. He is truthful. He is noble. He is preaching a message of peace. He does not confront anyone. So he comes in here and automatically acquires the upper hand, the way things are happening. And he drafts off what we call the Constitution of Medina, or the Charter of Medina, in which there are about 52 odd articles talking about how the people of Medina will live with each other, and how the Muslims of Mecca and the Muslims of Medina and the rest of them will live with each other. So the Prophet was not seen as a threat by these people. Had they seen him as a threat initially, this would not have happened. They are seeing him as a harmless person. He's not a threat. Neither did the Prophet know how far his message was going to go. Neither did they know how far his message was going to go. The reason why I'm saying neither did the Prophet know was that despite the verse, لَيُظْهِرَهُ عَلَى الدِّينِ كُلِّهِ, that God has sent His messenger to cause His religion to prevail over all religion, at the same time, when we study the life of the Prophet in Medina, you are finding that he did not know what was going to be done. The verses of the Quran, which say, we will either show you some of what we have promised to do to them, or, O Muhammad, we will kill you before that. So the Prophet did not know. He was being led by the day. On the other hand, the Prophet is saying, La adri ma yuf'alu bi wala bikum. I don't know what God is going to do to me or to you. In attabi'u illa ma yuha ilayya. I simply follow what is being revealed onto me. So they were seeing him as harmless, and maybe he himself may not have had the ambition of becoming the head of state and creating a Muslim state. But whether you like it or not, it was the creation of an Islamic state within the ambit of a multi-faith community, because he was effectively the head. Arbitrations will take place through him. He is writing the articles. They are signing them off. Now, in those articles that he writes out, you can see that he is a visionary. And you can see how broad-minded he is. And this is the Prophet himself. Here it is not the revelation, but the Prophet himself. He says that they will coexist harmoniously. They will have political rights as the Muslims have. They will have all the religious freedoms that the Muslims will have. So he has created a pluralistic community and a society where everybody is allowed to practice their religion freely. Now, it's not only the Muslims and the Jews that were included within this charter. We read that there were also idol worshippers. However, the one thing that the Prophet was extremely shrewd in doing with the blessed Prophet, with his sagacity, I use the word shrewd not in an offensive manner. He had the shrewdness of the beauty of godliness, was that he created that common enemy. The common enemy were the people of Makkah. So the Madinian people are a state united together. Their common enemy is the people of Makkah. That is such a brilliant move, to unite a whole people and say that's the common enemy. His problem, as was the Quran's problem, was the kufr and the shirk, their paradigm and their immoral ways. Now you can see the phenomenal thing that comes about. He says there will be security in Medina, we will not fight amongst each other. If a common enemy comes to us, we will all be united in the war efforts against the common enemy. We will all support them physically and through financial means. That is done here now. Now you look at the way the revelation now takes over. It's phenomenal. It's a pluralistic context. The Prophet sees, or the Quran sees, Jews, Christians, and Sabians. Now look at the broad vision of the Quran from Surah Baqarah, primarily Surah Baqarah, and then of course it goes into Surah Ma'idah and Nisa and Ali Imran. This shows the confidence of the Prophet and his broad-mindedness. You see, even in the word Muslim used in these first surahs does not denote the community of the Prophet, because the community of the Prophet are by and large referred to as Alladhina Amanu, those people who have brought faith. They are not called Muslims in the first few chapters that were revealed in Medina. They are called people who have brought faith. So the word Muslim, the designation Muslim and Islam within Surah Baqarah and Imran and other early surahs refers to those who have surrendered to God. And those who have surrendered to God meant to those people, the people of the Abrahamic faith. It's a phenomenal move the Quran makes here. The Prophet was not interested in converting anybody. The first verses that appear in Medina are these. Quran is the continuation of the same communication of the same God that all of us believe in. وَالَّذِينَ يُؤْمِنُونَ بِمَا أُنزِلَ إِلَيْكَ وَأُنزِلَ مِنْ قَبْلِكَ وَبِالْآخِرَةِ هُمْ يُوقِنُونَ. The believers are those, not the Muslims, the believers are those who bring faith in everything revealed unto you and revealed before you, O Muhammad. So immediately the Blessed Prophet is saying that my people are those who not only believe in everything I am telling them of the revelation that is coming through me, but they believe in everything that was revealed previously of the Torah and the Injil and the Suhuf Musa, Suhuf Ibrahim and Nuh and whatever has gone before me. They believe in all of this. Now you can imagine that broadness, that confidence that the Blessed Prophet had. That I'm not interested in you becoming Muslims in the formal sense, the uppercase M or uppercase I Islam. Be what you are. We are one. Calling them to the worship of one God, withstanding the differences in the way in which they understood God. قُلْ يَا أَهْلَ الْكِتَابِ تَعَالُوا إِلَى كَلِمَةٍ سَوَاءٍ بَيْنَنَا وَبَيْنَكُمْ. Say to the people of the book, come to that which is common between us and between you. أَلَّا نَعْبُدَ إِلَّا اللَّهِ, that we will not worship anyone save Allah. وَلَا نُشْرِكُ بِهِ شَيْئًا, and we will not associate with Allah anyone else. It's a very friendly invitation in which the Jews and the Christians are not antagonized, and they are being told that remain Jews, remain Christians. Let us all come together on that common feature that we all have, the worship of one God, and not associating anyone with God. His whole aim seems to be here is to preach the essentialities of Islam and to set up kufr as the common enemy, or shirk as the common enemy. Then the verses of salvation come. إِنَّ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَالَّذِينَ هَادُوا وَالنَّصَارَى وَالسَّابِئِينَ مَنْ آمَنَ بِاللَّهِ وَالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ وَعَمِلَ صَالِحًا فَلَهُمْ أَجْرُهُمْ عِنْدَ رَبِّهِمْ وَلَا خَوْفٌ عَلَيْهِمْ وَلَا هُمْ يَحْزَنُونَ. Indeed, those who have brought faith, and the Jews, and the Christians, and the Sabians, those were the groups that were around him at that point. Whoever amongst them genuinely brings faith in God, believes in the last day, does righteous deed, there will be no fear upon them. They will have their reward with their Lord, and they will not grieve. He is giving salvation to one and all. And in fact, this attitude was so embedded within his community that when Khalifa Umar goes to Jerusalem, he allows the Jews to come back and reside in Jerusalem, whereas they had been banished by the Christians for great many number of years after the Christians took Jerusalem from the Jews. So you can see that broadness of his vision and the way he was bringing these people, or at least addressing their minds, so that their minds may relent and come towards him. On the other hand, the Quran takes note of the exclusivist attitudes of the Jews and the Christians and addresses them. So you can see that the Islam of the Prophet was not the Islam that we are seeing today. The Islam that we have today, it does not resemble the Islam of the Prophet. The Islam that we have today, without meaning to be disrespectful, is the same Islam that is compared to Judaism and Christianity of the time of the Prophet. Because Judaism and Christianity of the time of the Prophet were very exclusivist. And Islam was not exclusivist at all. It was readily giving paradise to one and all and accepting them as they were. So the Quran says, وَقَالُوا لَنْ يَدْخُلَ الْجَنَّةِ إِلَّا مَنْ كَانَ هُودًا أَوْ نَصَارَى. None shall enter paradise, save whoever is Jew or a Christian. تِلْكَ أَمَانِيُّهُمْ. That is their wishful thinking, the Quran says. قُلْ هَاتُوا بُرْهَانَكُمْ إِن كُنْتُمْ صَادِقِينَ. Bring your proof if you be truthful. Then the Quran responds, بَلَى مَنْ أَسْلَمَ وَجْهَهُ لِلَّهِ وَهُوَ مُحْسِنٌ. Yes, whoever surrenders to God and is a doer of righteous deeds. فَلَهُ أَجْرُهُ عِنْدَ رَبِّهِ. Then he will have his reward with his Lord. He is excluding the Abrahamic faiths altogether. He's saying whoever surrenders to Allah will have the reward. وَلَا خَوْفٌ عَلَيْهِمْ وَلَا هُمْ يَحْزَنُونَ. There will be no fear upon them and they will not grieve. That's the broadness of his vision. وَقَالُوا كُونُوا هُودًا أَوْ نَصَارَى تَهْتَدُوا. This exclusivist epistemic claims that the Jews and the Christians made back in the day, the Quran takes note of it. They say, become a Jew or a Christian and you will be guided aright. The response Quran gives is, قُلْ بَلْ مِلَّةَ إِبْرَاهِيمَ حَنِيفًا. Rather, we follow the religion of Abraham, the upright, the God-fearing. وَمَا كَانَ مِنَ الْمُشْرِكِينَ. And he was not of the idolaters and the polytheists. So immediately the Quran is teaching a broader vision to its audience. And it is also reminding the Jews and the Christians that we have the same heritage. We belong to one God. The real problem is not in who is a Jew or a Christian or who is following me, the Prophet is saying. The real problem is between the worship of God and worship of other than God, and therefore following the commands, moral and virtuous command of God, or following the pagan, immoral, indecent traditions and unjust traditions. That is the real problem. Take note of that. You find the Quran saying to the Christians and the Jews, not only shall you attain salvation, but it's saying to the Christians and the Jews, actually you should be following the Torah and the Injil. Look at the confidence that this prophet has. قُلْ يَا أَهْلَ الْكِتَابِ لَسْتُمْ عَلَى شَيْءٍ حَتَّى تُقِيمُ التَّوْرَاةَ وَالْإِنْجِيلَ وَمَا أَنزَلَ اللَّهُ إِلَيْكُمْ مِنْ رَبِّكُمْ. Say, O people of the book, you are upon no solid ground until you establish the Torah and the Injil and whatever God has revealed to you. The Prophet is not interested in converting them to Islam. He is saying, no, you stay Jews, you stay Christians. It's perfectly fine with me. I have no qualms with that. The Quran has no problem with that. You will get your paradise, but at least be loyal to your own scriptures and establish your own scriptures. I have no problem with that. The fundamental problem that was there was with kufr and shirk and their immoral, indecent ways and their idolatry. Later on, we find that the Muslims were becoming arrogant as well with their newfound identity of Islam. Now here you find these verses to again tweak the situation. لَيْسَ بِأَمَانِيِّكُمْ وَلَا بِأَمَانِيَّ أَهْلِ الْكِتَابِ. Muhammad and Muslims, it is not your wishful thinking, neither the wishful thinking of the people of the book. Because they were all saying, the Muslims were boasting that we have the final messenger. The Christians were saying we have the word of God. The Jews were saying, well, we have the first of the Abrahamic faiths, and we are the earliest of the Abrahamic faiths. And of course, the Jews were also saying to the Muslims at that point that your prophet hasn't brought anything new. We've had all of this for ages now. In any case, the Quran responds to all of them. مَنْ يَعْمَلْ سُوًا يُجْزَى بِهِ. Whoever does evil will be recompensed by its equal. Then it says, وَمَنْ يَعْمَلْ مِنَ الصَّالِحَاتِ مِنْ ذَكَرٍ أَوْ أُنْثَى وَهُوَ مُؤْمِنٌ فَأُولَٰئِكَ يَدْخُلُونَ الْجَنَّةَ وَلَا يُظْلَمُونَ نَقِيرًا. And whoever does righteous deeds, be it a man or a woman, and they are faithful, then they will enter into paradise. But look at the way the verse ends, the series of verses end. وَمَنْ أَحْسَنُ دِينًا مِمَّنْ أَسْلَمَ وَجْهَهُ لِلَّهِ وَهُوَ مُحْسِنٌ وَاتَّبَعَ مِلَّةَ إِبْرَاهِيمَ حَنِيفًا. And who can be better in religion than the one who surrenders his whole to Allah and is a righteous doer of righteous deeds and follows the religion of Abraham. So the Quran is cutting away the religion of Muhammad Rasulullah, his particular religion. He's cutting away the religion of Isa and cutting away the religion of Musa. And he's saying, look, you're all one from Abraham. And Abrahamic message was only one. Be monotheistic, be righteous, be moral. And that was the only concern that the Quran had. But in doing so, the Muslims needed their own identity. It was an emerging group. They needed that religious identity because they did not fit in with the Jews or with the Christians. And that's why the identity of the Muslims and Islam was also created. But that identity was just the identity which is a need for human bodies to organize themselves with their own cultures and their own uniform way of doing things. But the spiritual identity that the Quran was giving was a very broad one that was inclusive of other faiths. It never meant Islam to be so narrow as the way we have understood it today. When we look at the life of the Prophet in Medina, in Mecca, he's talking about all the prophets. He's talking about the preachings of the prophets, the teachings of the prophets, the monotheistic message of the prophets, the moral, virtuous conduct of the prophets that had gone before. In Medina, he repeats the same message again and again. But he also has to carve out an identity for his own followers because they wouldn't know where they belong. But this carving of the identity for his own followers is an arbitrary feature of what he was leaving behind. The real thing he was leaving behind was that monotheistic message, that moral message and state of becoming virtuous and godly. In terms of creating his own identity, the Quran simultaneously does this. Together with preaching this very inclusive, broad vision to the community of Medina, it had to also carve out the identity of the growing, emerging community of the Muslims. Now, if you study, you will see that the Jews are called on to pray with the Muslims at some point in Medina. And we find that the Jews, at least from what I've read some places, did not find it a strange invitation, because they also had something that resembled salah, or whatever they call saluta. So they did not find this a strange thing. This is worshipping one God. The Surah Hamd is very God-centered. It's got no mention of Muhammad, or has got no mention of any other prophet, or any particular theology that is particular to Islam. Maybe Malik Yawmiddin, which they may have believed of sort at that point as well. So it wasn't a real prayer that was exclusively to the Muslims. Gradually, later on, it became an exclusive form of devotion for the Muslims as they acquired a greater identity, and of course that was a need of the bodily beings that were there. Similarly, the fast, when you study the verses, كُتِبَ عَلَيْكُمُ الصِّيَامُ كَمَا كُتِبَ عَلَى الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِكُمْ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. O you who believe, fasts have been prescribed upon you as they were prescribed upon those before you, so that you may become mindful of God. Now here, if you look at the verses that follow, you get the meaning. You get the verse of Shahr Ramadan. First, you get the verse of fasting. Then you get the same rights and wrongs of fasting being repeated in the next verse with the addition of Shahr Ramadan, and with the addition of doing takbir to Allah, if I'm not forgetting, celebrating the name of Allah at the end of it. And then you get verses in which God says that God knows that you are being disloyal to Him. Now God has made the religion easy for you. Eat and drink until the crack of dawn, and you can visit your wives at nights of month of Ramadan, but do not visit them whilst you are in i'tikaf in the mosque. Now, why did these verses come? The first verse, when it came, it seems that the Muslims started practicing the Christian fast. Not only abstention, but not consorting with their women. And of course, the young men are young men, and staying away from their spouses for 30 days is a bit difficult for them. So at nights they would go to their women. So the Quran immediately steps in. Instead of rebuking them, it said to them, now God has made it easy. You can be with your wives. 2, it seems that the Christian fast of the time did not allow for the consumption of more than one meal. They could only eat one meal. Now somebody of the companions of the Prophet fell asleep. As he fell asleep, he forfeited his meal. Next day he fainted. The Prophet felt heavy-hearted and sorrowful. The verse was revealed, now eat and drink as much as you want till the crack of dawn. So you can see earlier on they were practicing a Christian type of a fast of the day that we are reading through the exegetical literature. And then it was modified. So even the worship ceremonies were built around what was existing within the Ahlul Kitab, people of the book. The Muslims' dietary laws were the ones similar to the Jews. So the Jews did not find them a strange group of people. It was done very meticulously. Everybody around them is comfortable with them, and they are growing. And the verses that are coming out are very pluralistic verses, very accommodating, very broad. He is not a danger to anyone, and indeed he wasn't a danger to anyone. They saw him as a danger for no reason whatsoever. But the biggest thing that happens is the changing of the Qibla, which now is a huge political move, which gives them their identity and shows that they are audacious enough in Medina to say, no, we are same as you, yet we are an entity unto ourselves. So you find the verses of the Quran in which God says to the Prophet, قَدْ نَرَى تَقَلُّبَ وَجْهِكَ فِي السَّمَاءِ فَلَنُوَلِّيَنَّكَ قِبْلَةً تَرْضَاهَا. we see the turning of your face in the sky. We will cause you to face a direction that you are pleased with. After Mi'raj, the Muslims were facing Jerusalem to offer their prayers. Then suddenly they were told to face the Kaaba and to offer their prayers. Now this obviously is seen as an audacious move by the Jews of Medina, and there were obviously 9-10 clans there and tribes, and they'd been living there when before Aus and Khazraj had arrived. It was a very audacious move. This was a very difficult time for the Prophet because a lot of people started suspecting him. What does he want to do now? Why does he have to make this move? Why is he rattling them like this? What difference does it make whether we worship there or there? The Jews are our friends, they are cordial to us, and now suddenly he's going to move to that direction. Well, the Jews might not have been friend, but at least they were cordial with each other. Why does he want to move from that direction to this direction? And the Quran speaks, defends the Prophet. He says, I know people will say these things. سَيَقُولُ السُّفَهَاءُ مِنَ النَّاسِ مَا وَاللَّهُ مَنْ قِبْلَتِهِمُ الَّتِي كَانُوا عَلَيْهَا. The fools amongst the people will say, what caused them to turn from the Qibla upon which they already were established? So Quran takes note of the ground reality and what was happening, and it was very difficult for the Prophet. The response God gives is, for Allah is the east and for Allah is the west. He will direct whomsoever He wants to His path. So immediately, it is trivializing this thing in the minds of the people. For Allah is the east, for Allah is the west. God is not found in Jerusalem or in the Kaaba. This is just a need that the community has right now to create its own identity as a separate identity so that they can be known by. So they have turned towards the Qibla. But the Quran also gestures that the people who are confronting you, they also know the truth that Kaaba was the first house before Jerusalem. Maybe in that context there were people, there were scholars who actually knew that this Kaaba was the first house that was built for mankind. And then Jerusalem was established after that. But you can see that the Quran is very careful. Together with constructing their formal identity, it is also embedding the message with spirituality. So turn to the Qibla, wherever you are. Turn to Masjidul Haram from now on. Categorically turn to Masjidul Haram. You're not going to be turning anywhere else. This was difficult for the Muslims because now they are othering themselves. That we are separate from you, different from you. And that can't have been easy. It was a testing time. But as with all the other decisions that the Prophet took, it proved to be right. Because the audacity with which he does things empowers those who are onlookers and looking at him and seeing his level of confidence and ability to be able to establish himself as a group. But at the same time, the Quran is mindful that these directions are arbitrary changes. The real thing is that God does not have a direction. He's directionless. Similarly, you find a verse from Surah Baqarah. لَيْسَ الْبِرْ أَن تُوَلُّوا وُجُوهَكُمْ قِبَلِ الْمَشْرِقِ وَالْمَغْرِبِ. There is no goodness in turning your faces towards the east or the west. You see, today our problem, the Muslim problem, is this turning to east and west, isn't it? They face Jerusalem, they're going to go to hell. We face the Kaaba, we're going to go to paradise. According to their mindset, we are going to hell and they're going to paradise. God is actually saying in that real Islam that God is directionless. Your salvation is contingent upon what is happening in there, not what is happening to your bodies. God is extremely mindful to convey this message, and the prophetic mind is becoming broader and broader. If a person had been any less than the broad-minded prophet that we had, he would not have been successful in achieving what he achieved. The broader your mindset and your vision, the greater is the success and the greater the number of people will be attracted to that message. So the verse says, there is no goodness in turning to the east or to the west. Goodness is in believing in Allah, His revelation, His messengers, His angels, and in giving to the poor out of love for God. Zakat is mentioned later on in that verse, which was a mandatory giving. Before zakat, he is saying the best form of giving is giving in the love of God. So two things are being done by the revelation. One is the inner being that is being modified, the inner Islam that is being given, and the other one is the outer Islam that is being given. Now we see that the problems that we have all been because of this movement away from the inner Islam and adherence to the form of Islam. Think about it carefully. Today, the Sunni and Shia do not pray together. Why? Because their form of prayer is not accurate. That's the way we think, don't we? But according to the logic of the Quran, that is just the form. What is accurate and inaccurate is what is within the hearts. That is what you are supposed to look at. Not the way the arms are folded. For a Shia to fold their arm and pray, what can be wrong with it? For a Sunni to open their arm and pray, what can be wrong with that? For a Muslim to go to the wall in Jerusalem and pray there, what can be wrong with that? He's praying to the same God. For a Jew and a Christian to go to the Kaaba and to pray there, what can be wrong with that? We have been praying to a human like God who is so insecure, so intolerant. You have to pray with your arms folded or arms open. You have to pray at the wall, you have to pray at the Kaaba. We have been praying to a human God. The God of the revelation is removing himself from these restrictions. He is saying, look, these identities are arbitrary. They are bodily identities. This is what the Prophet understood. And hence his huge success, his broad-mindedness, the ability to absorb other cultures and other faiths within his own people, and to learn from them and to grow through them. And in fact, we see that the people who are killing Imam Hussein are squarely killing him on the basis of these sort of formalistic teachings. So I mentioned this a day ago or 2 days ago, and I'll just mention this and go into the conclusion, that when Khawli's wife asked him why he was joining the forces of Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad in fighting against Hussein, his response was that there is a hadith that whoever comes out in revolt against a caliph, then put them to death. So his wife says to him, but this is the grandson of the Prophet Hussein. He said, so what? So you can see here the impact of the formal understanding of Islam, the black and white, right and wrong, and the way we do things. Whereas she was understanding the essence of Islam, that no, Islam is beyond form. It is all about right and wrong. In any case, we come to the narration of the children of Lady Zainab. Ja'far had given Zainab either his 2 sons or their 2 sons. Either they were Bibi Zainab's sons, or one was her son and one was a son of Ja'far from another wife. And says to her, take them with you. And if Hussein finds himself in a state of need for defenders, then hand them over to Hussein. The battle breaks out. I narrate as the Zakirin narrate. Lady Zainab was filled with anguish. Her only concern was to secure the life of her brother. She would constantly emerge from her tent and see how the battle was progressing. For her, the only concern was the safety and the life of Hussein. So we hear that she would constantly say to Aoun and Muhammad, why have you not gone to the battlefield? And they would constantly tell her that our uncle looks away from us whenever we approach him. She dressed them, cleansed them, combed their hair. And then she said to Fizza, ask my brother to come to me. When Fizza goes to Imam Hussein, he said, oh Fizza, I shall not approach my sister. Fizza comes back. Zainab sends a message. Oh brother, son of my mother, your sister calls upon you and you refuse. So he comes to Zainab. He understands her intention. And he says, oh Zainab, ask me not to grant permission to your children to die. She said, oh brother, look at me. He says, how will I face my mother? That I valued my children over her child? But Ja'far may be displeased, oh sister. It is not the case, oh Hussein. He gave them for you. Hussein allows Zainab's two sons to engage in battle. Now this was the afternoon on the day of Ashura, when the companions had been killed and they were engaging in single combat. The Zakirin narrate that Hussein and Abbas stood at an elevated place, and Abbas was instructing Aun and Muhammad how to fight. Umar ibn Sa'ad said, who are these two youths? They said, the sons of Zainab. Does she love her brother to this extent that she sends the apples of her eyes to death in his love? On and Muhammad engage in battle. They chant poetry of war, inciting the enemies. As they are surrounded, Muhammad is struck down. As Muhammad descends, On takes his head in his lap and says, O Muhammad, I am soon to join you, grieve not. As he laments upon his brother, he too is struck down. As he is struck down, Imam Hussein advances to the battlefield. Hamid ibn Muslim says that Hussein carried the two bodies in a way that their chests were in Hussein's arms and their feet were dragging against the dust of Karbala. As Hussein approached near the tent, the customary practice was that the women would come to receive the martyrs, and ahead of them all would be Zainab. But Hussein does not see Zainab. Zainab is not to be found. Abbas Kummi states that Zainab was mindful that her brother would be embarrassed at seeing her. Hamid ibn Muslim says, on the day of the 11th, after the martyrdom of Hussein, I went to the battlefield where all the bodies lay. I found every body being attended to by a wailing mother or a woman. I found two bodies unattended to. I said, are these without any guardian? I was told, no, they are the children of Zainab. I asked, but where is Zainab? They said, she is at the body of her brother. I went quickly to Zainab. I said, oh Zainab, should you not spare your tears? Should you not shed your tears upon your children? She said, oh Hamid, I gave them to my brother. Matam Hussein.
Ya Hussein, 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 یا حسین مولا کو بلایا ہوگا جب ان محمد نے 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 مولا کو بلایا ہوگا معصوموں کی لاشوں پہ اکبر کا بابا جانے کس حال میں آیا ہوگا جب ان محمد نے مولا کو بلایا ہوگا جب ان محمد نے مولا کو بلایا ہوگا صدقہ ان محمد اکبر اور علی اصغر کا دو بیٹوں کی لاشوں پہ یہ سوچ کے ماجری نے ناشک بہایا ہوگا جب ان محمد نے مولا کو بلایا ہوگا جب ان محمد نے مولا کو بلایا ہوگا ان دونوں کی لاشیں تو ایک دوسرے سے دور پڑی تھی مظلوم نے کیسے ان کی لاشوں کو جا کے تنہا مقتل سے اٹھایا ہوگا جب ان محمد نے مولا کو بلایا ہوگا جب ان محمد نے مولا کو بلایا ہوگا عاشور کے شب رو رو کے زینب اجڑی نے لوگوں ان جگر کے دو ٹکڑوں کو ہے بن کر فخر مریم خود آپ سجایا ہوگا جب ان محمد نے مولا کو بلایا ہوگا جب ان محمد نے مولا کو بلایا ہوگا زینب کی گود بھی اجڑی اور بھائی کٹے مقتل میں خیموں کو آگ لگی تھی سجاد بیمار کو کیسے چلنے سے بچایا ہوگا جب ان محمد نے مولا کو بلایا ہوگا جب ان محمد نے مولا کو بلایا ہوگا معصوموں کی لاشوں پہ اکبر کا بابا جانے کس حال میں آیا ہوگا جب ان محمد نے مولا کو بلایا ہوگا جب ان محمد نے مولا کو بلایا ہوگا
محمد صلوات توجہ زیارت السلام عليك يا رسول الله السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدتي نساء العالمين. السلام عليك يا خديجة الكبرى. السلام عليك يا حسن المجتبى. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله الحسين وعلى 9 المعصومين من ذريتك علي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي والحجة بن الحسن عجل الله تعالى فرجا وسهل الله مخرجا وظهورا. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Brothers and sisters, can I please request you all to just be seated for a few announcements before we commence for Salah. So on the Saturday, the 6th of August, after the program, we'll be having a question and answer session with Shaykh Arif. Exclusive to tonight, there will be a 15-minute break after namaz, followed by Dua Kamel to begin at 9:50 p.m. There will also be a selection of publications by AMI Press available for sale in the entrance by the foyer. Cash and card payments are both accepted. Just a heads up for tomorrow's program, the conference room is available for families with children. Families with young ones are humbly encouraged to use these facilities. Tomorrow's program will start at 7:50 p.m. with Quran, followed by the lecture, then Matam, Ziyarat, and we'll end with namaz, inshallah. Refreshments tonight will be served both outside by the fountain and in the dining room for those who wish to be seated. Before I request everyone to prepare for Salat, can I call on Shaykh Mahmoud to give us a few words?
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Today we want to turn our attention back to Yemen, and we'll briefly be talking about the situation of the orphans and the widow support. We spoke about the situation in Yemen, that it is acute. You can just imagine people in all the states that we have described, but on top of that, now the safety or security of having a father is also deprived from them. I spoke with somebody once who had recently lost their father. I went to give them my condolences, and they just described it in one sentence. They said it is as if the roof of the house has gone. The verses that Shaykh Arif so touchingly has recited is Surah Baqarah, verse number 177, which says, "It is no virtue that you turn your faces towards the east or the west, but virtue is that one should sincerely believe in Allah and the last day and the angels and the book and the prophets, and out of his love spend of one's choice wealth for relatives and orphans, for the needy and the wayfarer, for beggars and for the ransom of slaves, and establish the salah and pay the zakah." Often Imam Ali alayhi salam used to raise his voice during the nights in the city of Kufa so as to be heard by everyone, saying, "Prepare for a journey and do good deeds with what you have been blessed. For what lies in front is a difficult road full of obstacles and frightening junctions from which there is no escape." We indeed are in need of good deeds. The Messenger, peace be upon him, was asked, "Man ahabba an-nas ila Allah?" Who is the most beloved of people to Allah? Qala, "Anfa'u an-nas lin-nas." The most beneficial of people to people. Abu Basir relates that Imam Sadiq alayhi salam said that Imam Ali alayhi salam used to declare, I am the guide and I am the rightly guided. I am the father to the orphans and help to the widows and the destitute. I am the shelter of the poor and the weak and the asylum for all the oppressed people. And you know of the narrations how he would in the darkness of night go and see to and tend to the needs of people. We find a narration which is so touching from Abu Tafil or Tufail, who said, during his lifetime, Imam Ali alayhi salam attached great importance to orphans, and he used to caress them. He would say, I am the father of the orphans. I must show compassion to them so that I will have treated them like a father. He continues, Imam Ali had put honey in the mouths of the orphans with his own hands so many times that one of the Muslims of the time said, I had wished I was an orphan too, so that I would have received the same attention and kindness from the commander of the faithful. This is how he treated orphans. There is a story which is famous among narrators and found in some books possibly, and may not be unlikely. It says that when it was announced that Imam Ali alayhi salam needed milk after being struck by the sword to heal the wound from poisoning, these very orphan children were gathered around his house with bowls of milk. Finally, I just want to end with this again from the Master Imam Ali: whoever takes care of the orphans, his children will be cared for. And as I said, let us not see them as somebody else's children. Indeed, they are our children. If you wish to support this, come and see me at the desk after the prayers. Finally, can I kindly ask you to recite Surah Fatiha for all the Marid, all the Marhumin for whom tonight has been dedicated,